Greetings and salutations, one and all. It is I, your not-so-humble host, Mr. Sean, Mini-Maker, YouTuber, Dungeon Master, and just, as of this week, PlayStation 5 addict. Today we're coming back at you with some more horror stories from the tabletop, going in mostly to r/RPG horror stories, but we are starting the day off with a story posted to my own subreddit, r/Mr. Sean Reads Stories. Of course, if you have your own story you would like me to read, no matter what kind of story it is, please post it there and it might show up on here. We're going to get into today's stories in a second, but first let me tell you about Chimera Miniatures. Do you remember when you were a kid and you used to draw your own superheroes, monsters, heroes, whatever, in elementary school? Maybe this guy had 6 arms, each of them holding a gun, or he had a huge battle axe and a spear while riding atop a horse. Again, if you could imagine it, it would show up on that notebook paper while you should have been listening to your math teacher. Well, at Chimera Miniatures, we seek to bring those childhood fantasy drawings to life. While I do offer a wide range of pre-made kit bash miniatures on both my eBay and Etsy, as well as repainted and not safe for work hero clicks, what I really want to do for you is I want to make your perfect mini. I want you to message me on my socials or my email with your idea. Maybe you have a sketch from when you were a kid, maybe you just have an idea that you've written out and you want to see what I can come up with, but either way, I want your perfect idea to grace your tabletop as a Chimera Miniatures one-of-a-kind custom miniature. I take your idea and using high quality miniature pieces, adhesives, and paints, I bring them to life. And all for the low base price of $10 a mini plus shipping and materials. Now when I say materials, that's not some weird hidden charge that's gonna just skyrocket the price of your mini. The materials are literally, if I have to buy a mini to make your mini, then of course I'm going to charge that fee. If I already have the parts on hand, there is no extra cost to you. Typically, I can make your mini for no more than an additional $5 cost in materials. And well, shipping is shipping. So please, if you have a character or a monster that you have just been dying to put on your table, but you just can't find the mini and don't have the skills or the time to make it yourself, please reach out to me. All that being said, let's get to today's stories. Our first story today comes from my own subreddit, r/Mr. Sean Reads Stories, and is entitled, Trying to Run Cyberpunk 2020 to Mainly D&D Players. There Were Shenanigans. Part 1, What's the Best Race to Play? Warning, mildly political. This is apparently part 1 of 3, so hopefully if Art Monzo likes how I read this story, he will grace us with parts 2 and 3. So one of my older stories was read on YouTube. Hey, I did that! And reminded me of another strange RPG tale about trying to get people to play anything other than D&D. It was during the pandemic, and most of my other games had died off. I decided to give Cyberpunk 2020 a try with some of my friends from MeatSpace and Discord to try to do something. Anything to beat the boredom of lockdown. I'm gonna cut in here for a second. I see this a lot, that a lot of these D&D horror stories start with lockdown-related boredom and desperation. I wish that I had had time to have one of these stories happen to me. I actually was running a gas station during lockdown, so I would have killed for boredom. Other than doing gig apps like DoorDash and Instacart. So I invited some bored friends and posted ads to some of the RPG servers I was on, mostly D&D, to see who would be interested. I was surprised at how much interest I got at the time, but in hindsight, Cyberpunk 2077 was coming out, and most of the people I played with were hardcore video gaming types. Oh yeah, I remember the hype for that game was legit. I know a lot of people have a problem with it. I kind of love Cyberpunk 2077. It has made me want to look into the tabletop game. So here are some exciting encounters while trying to set up and run the game. I'll put TLDRs at the end of each post. 1. What race is the best for min-maxing for 2020? Wait, are there races in 2020 or in Cyberpunk 2020, or is it just like white guy, black guy? So one of the first to answer the ad, let's go, Chris, had already started making a character a medic, which was great for a game where everyone was part of a flying combat ambulance. He just had one question that threw me off. So what is the best race for a medic build? I reread the question and scratched my head at what seemed to be blatant racism in the first 5 minutes of interacting with this guy. I asked him, can he elaborate the question? You know, racial bonuses and limits, you didn't say which races you're limiting, and from what I heard, basic meat characters don't last long. I looked over the 2020 core book again, There was cyberware, but I don't think race has anything to do with it stat or limit-wise. Was he trying to use new dog whistles to see if I was racist too? Like that damn frog and NPC meme in the early 2010s? This was around peak Trump, when alt-righters and literal Nazis were coming out of the woodwork to let their fascist flags fly strong. Like some reverse Pride event. I gave it half a day to gather enough material to mess with this guy, as it looked like I had a trumpet on my hand. I gave them a tour of the world, pointing out different cultures from different races, and that we were all the same despite our differences. So, no, he doesn't get to have extra stat points for being white, or less for being black. I was expecting some racist rant and me screen capping and posting it here before blocking him, but what I got was, yeah, is this Shadowrun or 2020? I get them confused a lot. I wondered, OP, if he had made this mistake. Turns out, he had mistaken the trauma team for Doc Wagon from Shadowrun and was making a changing dogman based on his fursona, a Corgi Labrador mix. He said that if he wasn't a dogman, then he wasn't interested in playing the game, as he loves to play his fursona. He had found any games outside of D&D or Shadowrun. I pointed him to the exotic body mods, and he was happy to take some corp loans to be turned into his happy Corgi Lab self. He had to leave the campaign halfway due to work issues, and was replaced by another furry medic, and I quote, a smart-ass meat rabbit. Now it's a running joke in my Cyberpunk games that a good chuck of trauma team techs and medics are furries who joined due to the corp willing to pay for their biosculpting jobs into their personas in exchange for top-tier engineers and doctors. I mean, why are the suits and helms so big? Oh my god, this is great. TLDR, player misreads what game they are playing and makes themselves look like a racist trying to ask if they can be a dog man instead of a pure human. Edit 1. First off, I got a Reddit care message, assuming from this post. I would like to let everyone know that I'm in a better place physically and emotionally since the events of this post. I'm in my new home, seeing a therapist on a weekly basis, and surrounded by better people overall. I appreciate your concern, random internet stranger. Second off, I was aware that my behavior here in hindsight was a bit problematic, if not cringe, especially with the furry isn't horror story here. I'll be posting a part 2 either later tonight or tomorrow. Thank you for your time. Edit 2? Not sure if this will help, but I'm ASD and ADD. Social stuff has a way of going over my head. Honestly, Art Monzo, I wouldn't call your behavior cringe in this case. It was just a communication error. Once the guy wanted to be a furry, you were very accepting of that, and, there's nothing wrong with calling people out for being racist. The guy wasn't being racist in this case, but, I get it. There was definitely a time when you never really knew. I'll be honest, while I was running a gas station and several gas stations, I actually had to be part of a group. Me and the store's other manager had to basically fire a employee because one day while we were working, first of all, it was hard enough just to get him to wear a mask, which was company policy, but then he started, ranting to customers that our state governor, Mike DeWine, if you don't know, I have stated I'm from Ohio before, that he was a Nazi sending the Gestapo out to restaurants to shut them down. And look, I get that people are entitled to their opinions, but when you're on the company time and the company dime, you toe the company line. And we don't, no company is really making a big thing of, throwing the word Nazi out there. We had to get in touch with our regional manager. He had to come in, talk to the guy, and a guy older than me, by the way. Like, he was older than me and the other manager. Not super old, like he was in his 30s. But he was like, well, all my life, people have been trying to silence me. And it's like, well, then maybe you should shut up. But no, yeah, Art Monzo, I agree. This story's not entirely horror. It's really more of just like a funny miscommunication. But I'll be honest, I did thoroughly enjoy this story. Thank you so much for sharing. I do look forward to part 2 and 3. Actually, it looks like somehow I missed the fact that Art Monzo has posted a part 2, so we're just going to dive right into that. Cyberpunk 2020 Shenanigans by Art Monzo, part 2. So now to more tales of DM trying his best to get a game off the ground in the middle of COVID in an attempt to retain some sanity from life at the time. Story 2. You said you run anything, so run this instead. One of the players I invited, let's call Schwan. Well, at least you didn't call him Sean. I thank you for that. Schwan only really played a few games of D&D before stopping because It was too Western, and the only Power Ranger favorable class is too weak. Yes, he used the more Japanese word for it. Still, I suck enough with English with my dyslexia not to botch this post up, let alone mix Japanese, Korean, and Hong Kong-style Chinese into this post. I think the word you're looking for, Art Monzo, is Sentai? Super Sentai? But yeah, I agree, Power Ranger's easier to go with. He was a big fan of martial art and Power Rangers-like media, even making contacts in the Japanese and Hong Kong film world. Connections he hopes to introduce me to someday soon, when travel opens up to Japan, and sure that I won't say anything to get me arrested as soon as we land in China. Well, good luck with that, Art Monzo. However, this was his worst during the pandemic and frankly one of the more immature things he had done during our friendship. I was starting Session 0 explaining what the campaign was, what the world was like, what the trauma team is, and just expectations for the 6 or so sessions when I asked if anyone had any questions. He spoke up and said, "So I found this game you may all enjoy, Power Rangers like RPG. I found it in Kickstarter and I would like you to run it, if you can." Alright, once again I'm gonna jump in and interrupt Art Monzo's story with a story of my own because I'm rude. When my group of friends, told me that we were gonna start playing Dungeons and Dragons and that I was gonna be the Dungeon Master, and I spent over a month, I think it was like 2 or 3 months, getting ready for this, learning the ins and outs, basically making the bare bones of the campaign, learning how the game worked, and right when we were about to start, one of our buddies goes, "Hey guys, I just found this new game called Starfinder," which if you don't know is Pathfinder in space. "I think we should play this." And I just looked at him and said, "Okay, if you want to run it, we'll play Starfinder, but if you still want me to run it, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons." He sent the PDF to the text chat, and everyone was silent for a moment, unsure of what was going on or how this related to the game. I told him maybe we could run it after this. He refused and said he needed to run this instead, as from what he understood, this was a pitch meeting for games despite telling me he read the ad copy I sent him. Oh my god, it is the worst when you send people some, information before the game starts and it's clear they didn't read it. Like seriously bro, you said you run anything. Run this instead. Who the fuck likes Cyberpunk anyway? It's outdated and cringe as fuck, he said when he didn't get his way. One of the other players pointed out that this was the game he signed up for, but he brushed him off, saying that this was a pitch meeting. I said as much. I didn't. And began to say that the genre was Asiaphobic due to how Asians are portrayed in films like Blade Runner. Mind you, this guy at the time was actively shitting on Twitter brand social justice types and constituted them annoying as fuck and not even genuine allies. So this was low bar shaming. The guy's favorite films were Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Scanner Darkly, and Dark City. Mostly cyberpunk or cyberpunk-styled Power Rangers stuff. Yeah, OP, this definitely doesn't sound like anything in what your game you're doing is Asiaphobic. In fact, I know, let's be honest, in the game Cyberpunk, the Arasaka Corporation isn't portrayed very well, but when you're running a tabletop game, as long as there aren't inherently racist rules in the game, the game doesn't have to be racist because you're the one running it. This guy just sounds like he's using a buzzword, because at the time there was a lot of Asiaphobia going on during the lockdown because of, people weren't really sure about, the virus and what was going on with it, so they lashed out at where it supposedly came from. So I think he's just using buzzwords to try and get his way. I told him again that I would look at it later and to get back to the game at hand. He told me that he just wanted to pitch a better game and was going to leave to do something less gay, offending half of the players who were LGBTQ+. One of the other players, I forgot who it was, pointed out how fucking insulting that language was in this day and age, but coming into a game to force another RPG and then balk when he didn't get his way was just shitty behavior. He replied, "Well, not following societal expectations is my kink, bro, and you not respecting that is kink shaming, you fake homo, bro," before hanging up. Alright guys, let me just take this moment to remind you that here on Chimera Miniatures we are 100% kink friendly, but this is not a kink, this is a guy looking for an excuse to be an asshole. This guy pulled a IRL, "it's what my character would do, bro." I love offensive humor, but I hate when people use the "it's just a joke" as a way to be shitty to one another. It's only humorous if everyone's laughing. Part of comedy is not just knowing how about timing, but also knowing your audience. And, it's not just important for comedy, but also just being alive and interacting with others is knowing when and when not to just run your mouth off. Months later, when the vaccine came out, my friend, let's call him Peacekeeper, as he will be necessary for the final part of this nightmare, we talked to Schwan about the use of 2000s language, the immature comments, especially the, well, X is my kink, so stop kink shaming, bro, and just being rude overall. Schwan tried to pass it off as a pandemic stress, but this happened before that. The only thing that changed was how frequently the incidents had been happening. It took a few good talks without me there, and the threat of being kicked out of the friend group that he decided to change his ways. I never got a full apology from him for the game. I have never invited him to another RPG or has asked him to join in one ever since. TLDR, friend tries to make the group drop the game and play his Power Rangers RPG instead, made some rude comments, and tries to make everyone out to be racist because they are Asian, and he quit Session 0. First of all, before I get into my takeaways, I wanted to give Art Monzo a huge compliment. I noticed in this post you mentioned you have dyslexia, and I just wanted to compliment you on the quality of your writing has improved leaps and bounds since the first story of yours I read, and that is amazing. As I know people with dyslexia, I know how hard it can be to type these fairly lengthy stories, and your writing is getting so much better, and I really want to thank you for that. I want to compliment you on it. So excellent. I'm really proud of you. I hope you're proud of yourself. It is no easy task. My fiance's father has dyslexia, and I know writing out a lot of things is difficult for him. He's a very intelligent man, but writing and even reading can be very difficult. I will also say that your friend group, good on them for being able to broker peace and, I guess, maintain the friendship. I'm not entirely sure I'd want to be friends with this guy, but if you all get along outside of this kind of incident, then yeah, it's always good to be able to maintain your friendships. I had a friend who was not invited to join the initial D&D campaign I ever played in because everybody knew he would be that guy at the table, and while he was a little butthurt about it at first, ultimately we were able to save the friendship for a while. At least we've all kind of gone our separate ways, but peacekeeping, as long as nobody is being made to suffer in silence, is always a good thing. I will say my tactic when something like this situation happens where someone's like, well, I know we're playing this, but I want to play this, my groups, we've always had a simple idea behind that, is when someone says that, we're like, cool, you run it, and we'll play. If someone has never been a dungeon master, game master, storyteller, they might not fully understand the amount of work that goes into setting up a game, and especially all the rules reading, which, again, you said, as someone being dyslexic, I'm sure there is additional stress involved with all that, but yeah, people just don't understand all the work that goes into it, so, I definitely think that if someone wants to try a new game, absolutely, I'm down, but you need to be the one that runs it and buys the books for it. And finally, I just want to give you a very big pat on the back for not tolerating toxic BS in your game. We see so many times in these stories on the subreddits, and just in general, that people let things go on way too long. It ruins the game, it ruins the dynamic, people leave, and when the offending party should have just been kicked out in the very beginning, and that's more or less what you did, so, kudos to you, and I really do look forward to part 3, Art Monzo. Thank you so much for sharing. Alright guys, for our final story today, we're going back to RPG horror stories with a story by user Game of Burners, and it is called That Time When the Girl Who Is Not Like the Other Girls I Play D&D Met Another Girl Who Also Played D&D.
This happened in my college's D&D club back in 2013 or 2014. Our college's D&D club is entirely male, except for one single girl. I know what you're thinking, oh god, what creepy shit befell this poor girl. Don't worry, nobody in the club was weird towards her. It isn't that kind of story. In fact, she's the problem player. This girl had a very huge
I'm not like other girls
energy. For example, her characters were always rebellious noble girls who didn't want to wear dresses and marry. Her usual backstory formula for her characters was abusive father, plus unwanted betrothal, plus asshole fiance, plus running away, plus learning to fight all on her own on the streets. She would occasionally mention that she hates dresses and never wants to have kids. She only wore jeans and t-shirts of heavy metal bands. She had her hair dyed blue, had 3 nose piercings and 4 ear piercings on each ear. Looking back now, she acted like she invented alternative punk fashion. The red flags were there, but we never picked up on because she didn't have another girl in the club to compete with. We shall refer to her from here on as Aria. I was playing a game with Aria and 3 other people for a party of 5. We were running a fun little homebrew where our party was a group of royals from various countries trying to unite all the nations to fight the BBEG, who awoke from his ancient slumber. The game was heavily inspired by Game of Thrones because everyone in the club was obsessed with the series, and this was before the disaster that was Season 8. Arya was playing the youngest princess of the Woodland Kingdom who made a bet with her father that if she defeated the BBEG, she wouldn't have to marry. She played a rogue because it was the most unladylike class for her to play in the narrative of the story. I was playing the 3rd prince of the Northern Kingdom who was a star druid. The other guy at the table was the paladin crown heir of the Dragon Kingdom. 2 other players had to drop out of the game in Session 7 because their coursework was getting too crazy for them to have a social life. The DM decided to bring in another player who he recently met in one of his classes to fill the vacancy. In our 8th session, we were introduced to a princess of the Western Kingdom. She was played by a girl. This was a problem for Arya. We will call this new player Sansa. Sansa was just as nerdy as everyone in the club and had an obsession with Game of Thrones, just like we did. Because of this, she instantly got along with all of us. Especially when she showed up in a blue sundress with her hair styled like Daenerys Targaryen. She was absolutely obsessed with the fashion of the series and often modeled her looks after Daenerys Targaryen, Cersei Lannister, Sansa Stark, or Marjorie Tyrell. Compared to Arya, Sansa was traditionally feminine. While everyone was talking amicably with Sansa, Arya was acting a little bit distant. Every time Sansa tried to strike up a conversation with Arya's responses were 1 or 2 words at best. This was rather weird and noticeable because Arya was the type to talk your head off for hours. Sometimes we joked around and told her to remember to breathe as she was talking, but when Arya and Sansa talked to each other, it went like this. Sansa:
Did you like the new episode?
Arya: Yeah. Sansa:
Wasn't it great when Joffrey started choking? I was going to save it as my ringtone.
Arya:
Sansa: And did you see the thorns in Queen Marjorie's wedding dress? I just love the attention to detail they put in this show.
Arya: Yup. Sansa seemed to be so excited to meet another girl who was into D&D and Game of Thrones just like her, but Arya always seemed like she wanted nothing to do with her. In-game, Sansa volunteered to build a life domain cleric to cover the original cleric's departure. She wore a homebrewed dress of billowing with plated steel woven throughout it so that she can wear dresses but have it flow away from her feet and legs in combat so it wouldn't impede her movement. Basically, she wanted to stay heavily armored while wearing a poofy flowing dress. It was approved instantly by the DM. Arya, out of character, questioned the DM on this homebrew, stating that it bent the rules of D&D a little too much, which was a really crazy take to have at this game's table, because we all had really insane homebrew.
Hey guys, Mr. Sean here, just gonna come in with my own thoughts on this little dilemma. It just sounds like more than anything, this armor is nothing more than an aesthetic change as opposed to being anything game-breaking. If you want your steel plate armor to be a ball gown, your DM could probably do that. They could say, for the sake of the game, that it would be very expensive, but as these people are all royalty, I assume that you could easily get yourself a combat ball gown with your vast wealth, so it's just really hard to see where, I mean, we know where Arya's coming from, but in the moment, it's like, how did you think you were going to be able to pull off this complaint just because you don't want her to wear a pretty dress? I wouldn't in any way, shape, or form say that this even bends the rule of D&D. This is just an aesthetic choice.
My Star Druid had a homebrewed spell called Star Strike, which was literally Eldritch Blast, but with radiant damage. I had an owlbear pet that functioned like a ranger's companion, despite me not multiclassing into ranger. Also, it was made out of stardust, and I could fuse with it to become a were-owlbear for 10 minutes, with stats equivalent to a challenge rating 4 beast, and an AC equivalent to heavy plate. The warlock used to be in our party had a pact with Primus, who gave him meta magic and sorcery points. He had a Mordrin as his warlock pet, and was summoning duodrons, and the tridons like a circle of shepherd druid. Arya herself had a cape that turned into bat wings as a bonus action, and gave her a flight speed of 25 feet. Also had an invisible dagger that allowed her to do surprise attacks without hiding so long as the blade was clean, and we ran old school sneak attack crit rules so her sneak attack damage would be doubled on a crit, making her capable of one-hit killing non-boss enemies every now and then. Our paladin had a fucking baby metallic red dragon that he could ride because Targaryen things. Suffice to say, everyone in the party had horrendously busted homebrews. With all of this in the game, the fact that Arya drew the line at a billowing armored dress was rather baffling. DM didn't do anything because Sansa's homebrew dress was the most harmless homebrew in the entire game. This would occur multiple times. Every time Sansa asked for a homebrew that helped catch her up to our power level, Arya would have concerns about how it was fucking up the rules, even though everyone at the table was constantly desecrating rules as written by simply existing. We were all level 8, but our homebrews probably made us functionally level 12 or higher. We also definitely abused the rule of cool, outright throwing the book away to do awesome shit. One time Arya threw her batwing cape to the paladin, who caught it and wore it mid-combat so he can fly alongside his dragon and have an epic final kill on a boss monster. The whole process broke item interaction and attunement rules, but the DM allowed it because the end result would be super epic. But whenever a rule of cool moment happened to Sansa, Arya suddenly became a rules lawyer. There was a moment where Paladin was going to allow Sansa to ride his dragon so that the two of them could do some awesome combo attack, but Arya argued for a full 20 minutes on how Paladin's dragon wouldn't allow Sansa to ride it. Even though Paladin and DM said that she could for rule of cool. In fact, the rule she was arguing over was a homebrew rule that sure as hell didn't exist in Raw. It was little things like that that happened constantly over the campaign. In combat, whenever Sansa would hang back to support us, Arya would make a backhanded comment about her being the best cheerleader ever, insinuating she wasn't doing anything. Even then, Arya would often have an issue if Sansa attacked, saying that she was wasting a turn. But it's not like Sansa attacks stupidly. She would set Bless up, make sure everyone wasn't bloodied, mostly used cantrips, and always made sure she had spell slots for multiple revivifies. One time Sansa was the only PC left standing after a mind flayer downed the rest of us with a surprise fireball that we all failed the dex save on. She at first used mass healing word to pick us up, but we got downed again by another fireball. Sansa saw that she couldn't pick us up with the mind flayers still around. Since the mind flayer was bloodied, she fired a higher level guiding bolt and killed it to end the encounter. Then she picked us back up with another mass healing word. Now, at this point, this was Sansa's greatest combat feat, and we all cheered for her since she saved our asses. Everyone except Arya. Arya instead pointed out who she thought dealt the most damage and truly contributed to the fight, souring Sansa's moment and everyone else's mood. After that moment, Sansa started to change. When she first joined, she was rather energetic and excitable. But after the Mind Flayer fight, she started to become more quiet, roleplayed less, and didn't take as many notes as before. In the beginning, we chose to ignore Arya's behavior, but when it finally clicked to us that Arya was being a bully, and Sansa was too meek to defend herself, we chose to do something about it. I do regret not acting sooner. The table started to go into a vicious cycle. When Arya would be passive-aggressive towards Sansa, someone would defend Sansa. Arya would get upset and get a little bit meaner the next time. It all crumbled down when Arya killed Sansa's pet lion cub that she was racing with the bullshit reason that it was going to grow up to become deadly and uncontrollable. She argued that she was preventing a future problem. Thankfully, DM reversed this act after seeing how much it upset Sansa and how needlessly cruel the action was. DM threatened to kick Arya out if she did something like that again. Arya responded with malicious slander. Arya started making up rumors about Sansa and other club members' DMs. Now the rest of this story is information I got secondhand from other club members that weren't part of my table. I never saw the messages that Arya put out, but she basically said that Sansa was sleeping with all of us for better rewards. Like all of us, at the same time. Yes, she said that we were all gangbanging Sansa like some porno for in-game D&D rewards. Nobody believed her because Sansa was way too much of a dork. I say that with love. To even instigate flirting. I think Arya expected everyone in the club to rally up, gather pitchforks, light torches, and kick out the accused harlot to the streets based purely on hearsay. That didn't happen. Instead, the club members told the president, and the club president took Arya's side and asked her, "Yo, what the fuck is your deal? Did Sansa do something to you? Why do you hate her so much?" Apparently, Arya answered him with a slut-shaming tirade against Sansa, saying that she was dressing slutty to get the guy's attention, flirting with everyone, pretending to like D&D, and being a fake fan of Game of Thrones. It bothered Arya that us guys couldn't see how fake Sansa was, and she was fucking sick of it. This was not true. Sansa's dresses were literally down to her ankle, and she wore a chemise to hide her cleavage that she was constantly pulling up. She gave the vibe that she was a bit insecure with herself. She wasn't capable of flirting with anyone, because she only ever talked about medieval fantasy dresses or Game of Thrones. She didn't know any other topic of conversation. Anyone who played a game with her can actually tell that she liked D&D, and it was clear that she played it a shit ton because of her game knowledge. She knew my druid spells better than me. She not only liked Game of Thrones, but she read all the books in A Song of Ice and Fire, the books the TV show was based on, as well as the supplementary lore books by George R.R. Martin like Dunk and Egg series or Fire and Blood for some reason. Arya saw Sansa as some kind of stereotypical preppy blonde girl from some bad Disney Channel movie and not for the massive dweeb that she actually was. Word got around to Sansa and she expressed that she was going to quit the club because she didn't want to be the center of any drama. The club president told her that she didn't do anything wrong and that she didn't have to leave. Club president told Arya to cut this shit out because it was bullying and nobody in the club of basement-dwelling geeks were big fans of it. Arya rage quit when she realized everyone was taking Sansa's side and another club member took her spot at our table. This whole mess happened years ago, but years later things got better. I happened to have gotten back in touch with Arya in 2019 after I went on a massive public tirade over Game of Thrones Season 8 on my social media. My post triggered a reunion of the old D&D club members as they all flocked to my page to bitch about the last season. We created a chat room to further air out our grievances with Game of Thrones' ending. During this reunion, Arya reunited with Sansa for the first time in years. Get this, Arya actually apologized to her. Arya said that she deeply regret what she did and cringes heavily over her "I'm not like the other girls" phase. She says that whenever she remembers her antics from that point in her life, she convulses from utter shame. She says that she sometimes lays awake at night for hours, wishing she had more social awareness during that time. She said that she feels really bad that she tried to bully another woman out of an already male-dominated hobby, and feels awful about pitting two women against each other. Sansa forgave her, shared her own cringy feelings over how she used to walk around in high fantasy clothing all the time, and the both of them had a good laugh. As they chatted, they found out that they both changed careers a year out of college, went back to school, and became nurses. They even practice in the same field of medicine under the same big medical company, just in different hospitals. To nobody's surprise, they had a lot in common. Shame they missed out on a potentially close friendship earlier. I don't think they hang out in real life, but at least they're internet friends now. I see them on my feed every now and then complaining about crappy doctors and sharing funny work stories.
I think it's a goddamn shame that there are people out there who base their entire sense of self-worth on the idea that they are somehow different and or better than everyone else of the group that they're in. This can be the people who are uber competitive, have to be the best at everything, or even just the "I'm not like the other girls." The idea that you have based your entire sense of self on the idea that you are 100% unique, nobody else is like you, as good as you, as different as you, as quirky as you, just means you are closing yourself off from potentially connecting with other people. it can be very awkward to be the one girl at the D&D table because of all of us horny nerd guys. It's why certain stores have started doing ladies' night D&D, where if you're a guy, GTFO, you aren't in the store. You're not. This is for a place for women to not be asked out by creepy nerds. And as much as I want to be just really mad and shit all over Arya in this story, I mean, it's been painted a pretty clear picture of her bad behavior. If anything, I just felt sorry for her. Maybe not as sorry as I did for the girl who was actually being bullied, but Arya was kind of bullying herself at the same time. Rather than making a connection, she decided to isolate herself because she couldn't grasp the fact that there might be more women like her out there. And this thing happens all the time. It's not gender specific, it's not gender exclusive, it's not even hobby exclusive. I remember when the MCU got big and so many more people, including women, started liking Marvel Comics characters. And I was running a HeroClix tournament and there were no women there. There were never any women there. We never had a single female player. I'm sure they exist, but they didn't at my store, unfortunately. But one of my players was just bitching about how women aren't real Marvel fans. They probably didn't even know who Groot was before Guardians of the Galaxy came out. And I was like, dude, I didn't know who Groot was before Guardians of the Galaxy came out, minus they had made a HeroClix of him slightly before the movie came out, but it's like, that was my only knowledge of Groot. And it's like, dude, stop bitching about, people didn't put their time in, they didn't suffer under, being the comic book nerds, and just enjoy the fact that you can talk about your hobby with more people. Be happy that these fake fans, as you call them, know who Groot is. And that was the thing, too, is that it was very clear that this girl, Sansa, was not a fake fan, but Arya couldn't wrap her mind around that at the time. She had to be a fake fan. Because if people are accepting of who you are, then your entire identity as a unique, one-of-a-kind outcast is in question. Did you have to be an outcast? Were these people there all the time and you just didn't know about it? It throws your entire sense of identity into a downward spiral. And I get it. People in this day and age where everyone's connected, everybody can see everybody all the time, the desire to stand out from the crowd and be unique is bigger than ever. Nobody truly just wants to be another face in the crowd, but that's the thing, is that I would rather be a part of the crowd than be the person that everybody knows but is off by myself. While I know almost nothing about sports, I'm reminded of a Woody Hayes quote, and this applies both to football and to life. You win with people. Through D&D, I have made some of the best friends I've ever had. I found love, I found a sense of purpose. D&D has made my life better, and it wouldn't have if I had been closed off to the idea that there are people like me. No man is an island, and if you are, well, it's a pretty lonely island. I am glad to hear that Arya did get out of that phase eventually. I just wish that Sansa didn't have to be her punching bag for her to realize what she was doing. I also wish Arya could have identified her problem behavior before she had to leave a club that, from the sound of it, she truly enjoyed, and that she could have realized that that club was big enough for two ladies. But such is life, live and learn. And then get loves if the commercials are to be believed. And that's our video today, guys. This one ended up being a little longer than normal. We're clocking in at almost 40 minutes, so I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. Be sure to check the links, reach out to me on my socials, buy a mini, and when all is said and done, I am Mr. Sean, this is Chimera Miniatures, and I hope you alpha great day and an even beta tomorrow. Bye-bye!